Welcome back to DistroWars, and today we're going to look at two excellent GNOME-based distributions. Even though GNOME is not my favorite desktop environment, but nevertheless, these are two distros that are excellent distributions. And they do actually both have options for running other desktop environments should you want to do that. We are, of course, talking about none other than PopOS by System76 and Fedora, the testing ground for Red Hat. So let's go ahead and first look at the latest release announcements. I wanted to select these two because both of them came out with a new version this week, and this DistroWars is going to be able to spin up the new versions, have a brief look at them, look at anything new, while we compare two fairly similar distributions because they're both billed as good distros for new users coming to Linux. We're going to evaluate that. Now, I think new users coming to Linux, Fedora does still take a little bit of work out of the box. PopOS is pretty good, albeit the GNOME environment is a little bit more cumbersome for a new user to figuring out that on top of everything else. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and see what these guys are going to be looking like. So in the latest PopOS, which is 2010, based of course on Ubuntu 2010, they have done a few different changes. We have Linux kernel 5.8 and GNOME 3.38 now. So that's good that we actually have the latest in the kernels and the GNOME versions. There's also been security updates, which have been backported to PopOS 2004. So if you are still using 2004, there is no problem with that. The next thing they did is they added some support for Deb 822 repository format. I had to look that up because I was not aware of what is going on with that. What this is just a different way of labeling the repositories in the sources. And so it makes things a little bit more efficient, a little bit easier to run. So you can basically put the repository up there, and then you can just edit just the version number on a separate line. It's a little bit more efficient. Mostly, I think, more efficient for developers than it is going to matter much to the end users. But that's actually, it's something that's good for the developers and for some other people as well. They've also added stacking. I did find part of this is not working right as of yet, as far as holding Super and S to convert it back to a standard window. That is not working in my environment. But basically stacking is a really cool feature. They have a nice video here about detailing it and the keys here. Stacking is going to enable you to stack windows together like web browser tabs. Definitely an interesting thing. So, really neat. And then we can make exceptions for floating windows. So this is if you're using the tiling window manager feature of PopOS, then you can set some things to never actually tile so that if it's a small dialog box or something, it doesn't mess up everything else. We do have some fractional scaling, monitor support, and then we just have some upgrades. So that's one of the greatest advantages of PopOS is not only is it a good Ubuntu-based Linux distribution, but they also are always doing interesting things to it to really make the system come out. And with that, what we end up seeing is something that is not just a desktop environment thrown on top of a distro and call it a new distro, which is what we get a lot. There are some compelling differences that we find in PopOS. Fedora, on the other hand, we pretty much read through this and said, just general system improvements. Let's just bring software up to the current versions. So we're not really getting anything different in Fedora 33. We're just getting the new recent versions. So ultimately, it's not anything to write home about other than the new versions of whatever we happen to be running. They do have a note here on the secure boot. Of course, the boot hole vulnerability is causing the various Linux secure boot, the secure boot keys to expire soon. And so they do have some information on that. And so be aware of that if you are running Fedora in a secure boot environment. There will come a time when those keys must be revoked. So be prepared for that. We also have a lot of different builds. We have some ARM builds and server builds and things, stuff that we don't get on PopOS. So you have a lot more versatility as far as hardware and purpose components inside of Fedora. PopOS is going to give you a more rock-solid workstation environment. Both of them, as I said, will allow you to use different desktop environments. In the case of Fedora, you want to download the everything build and install the desktop environments you prefer on the installation step. PopOS, you install everything with Gnome, and then they give you good documentation for how to add new desktop environments should you want to. And so both of them do have that capability as well. With that being said, though, let's go ahead and boot up our first one, which is going to be PopOS, and we will have a look at what these changes are, what it looks like, how to use it, and things like that. So here we are on the login screen on PopOS. Just go ahead and enter your super secret password, and you are good to go. They only have the one desktop environment option. If you added more desktop environments, there will be a little gear icon in the lower right of the screen, and then you can choose your new desktop environments. So here is what we get. Both of these, I don't believe, do these have folders or not? I don't know if PopOS supports folders on the desktop. Oh, PopOS does support folders on the desktop. Hey, immediate win for me. I like folders on the desktop. So you actually can use the desktop. It may not be as fluid as some distributions do, but hey, at least you have the option. We can get into our settings, display settings, and such from the desktop as well. And let's go ahead and have a brief look at our settings. So here's Bluetooth. We have online privacy, privacy sound. The firmware option you'll find in the settings, this is actually something that is built in by PopOS. So the firmware is something that you will find on PopOS. You will not find it in other builds. And if we come on down, you can see we are on GNOME 338.1. So there's what we have. We are running this nice darker theme. We have a shop, which is going to enable you to install anything that you might want to install. This is based on the store based for Elementary OS. And if you search for a package, then it's going to give you whatever happens to be in the repositories. Let's check if this is a repository or a Flatpak. So this is a Flatpak. We might need to run, I ran updates, so I should see more stuff in the repositories. But we do have, the store is actually a very good store. We have Office built in by default. You can see that some things are already combined together here. This is actually, I believe PopOS might have been doing this for a while, although it is a new feature in GNOME 338 that anybody can go ahead, drop things together, and produce your folders. Let's go ahead and flip through some things in the store here, see what we find. There's Arc. That's a Flatpak. Okay, there we are. That's how you can change the difference. So you can choose between the Flatpak and the Deb. It's just defaulting into Flatpak. So my apologies. I haven't jumped in the Pop store for a little bit. So there's what we have. Now, one of the things that makes PopOS a little bit different is that they have the ability to create your tiled options. So if I hit my super key here, I have a terminal, I have a folder option, but we have this option up here which allows you to tile your windows. So now we basically have a tiled window manager. And this is actually an excellent primer into window managers. If you are interested in such things, you can move the windows around, and you can see that when you create a new window that it's going to automatically tile things together. Here let's see if I can combine those guys together. That way I have a bigger web browser, a few smaller things. Now what PopOS has done now is they are experimenting is they have the ability to create these tabbed windows. So controlling your Meta or Super or Windows key as you might know it and hit S. Now you'll see that this guy says home up here. It is now highlighted in yellow. That means that we can now add things to it. So if you hold the window and press S, then you can go ahead and toggle it on or off. So if it's on, now you can go ahead and add new things to it. What I found is that I could not actually seem to take things off of it. And I'm not sure if that's a bug or if that's intentional, but if I wanted to get the terminal out of here, I actually have to close the terminal and open up a new instance of the terminal. And it's going to add whatever is on there into the new tab. So there is, let's see if we can do, let's open this up, see what it does. So that guy there is going to open up the store separately, since we were highlighted on this guy here. When you open up something new, it automatically drops it onto it. We also can hold our meta and our slash. And I believe this is going to, okay, that's going to highlight things. I can drag the windows over here, and now I can use these guys in a tabbed format, and your meta and your arrow keys will toggle back and forth between them very easily. And of course, we have our Alt tab as well. If you want to jump and bust out of that thing, you can do that. So there is a very nice feature inside of PopOS that does make it a little bit different, the ability to tab things. Now, if you are finding an individual item that you don't want tabbed, or you don't even really want it floating, you have the ability here to select certain windows that will not tile together and things like that. So the bottom line is PopOS has been doing a lot of very good and compelling things to their desktop to make it more than just GNOME with Ubuntu and a few other system changes under the hood. So ultimately, PopOS is really good. Now, it is going to be based on Ubuntu, and that means that it's going to work probably with more hardware out of the box. It's going to have codecs easily to install, and let's see if, I don't remember if on PopOS, I think the codecs are actually installed by default. Oh, hold on. So there's some plugins there. Okay, so if I wanted to add more GStreamer codecs, I can go ahead and just find those. It searches it up in the store. So you're going to have better support for your computer out of the box on PopOS regardless. We do have a customized GNOME. We have a lot of good compelling features, and being that it's based on Ubuntu, it's going to run quite a bit better. So there is PopOS. Let's go ahead and have a look at what Fedora looks like. So here we are on the Fedora login screen, and you can see it's pretty much the same. We do actually have a gear down here. So we have GNOME, we have GNOME Classic, and we have GNOME on X. I'm going to switch over to GNOME on X just because when you are running on Fedora on a Wayland on a virtual machine, it tends to be a little bit less responsive. And so as we will get a little bit more responsiveness on X on the virtual machine. If you're running this on a real hardware, when Wayland will probably work just fine for you. But over here, we have landed on the Fedora desktop. And if we head on over, look at our settings tools here, you can see that we don't have the firmware item in there. As I had indicated, we are on the same version of GNOME, 3.38.1. And one of the things is, oh, sad, no desktop icons. Fedora instantly sucks now. No, it doesn't suck. I just want to point out the difference. If you do work off of icons on your desktop, like I actually do in my regular workflow, then Fedora does not have that capability out of the box. You would need to use a GNOME extension for that. PopOS does set that up. As far as the software that is installed, we have a very similar suite of software. In other words, not a whole lot. We do have a few things lumped together under our utilities, and because it's GNOME 3.3.8, we can actually create new folders like this as well. You can hit the button here and change the name. That's going to be the same on both of these. This one has the GNOME Software Center rather than the one that is on PopOS. I do actually like PopOS better than GNOME Software Center. Really, the only saving grace of GNOME Software Center is it's pretty universal across Linux distributions without any real tinkering. When you are using Fedora, Fedora has a pure FOSS approach out of the box. So if you're a person that's like, I absolutely only want to use free software, Fedora is going to be your go-to. The downside is that does come with some trade-offs in which some things will not work as well, and on some hardware it will not work as well. We're going to enable third-party repositories, which could actually enable some non-free software. But that's what I'm going to want to do if I happen to want some software that we may not get otherwise. So you can see here's third-party repositories. We have Google Chrome possible here, but you'll notice it is disabled. We have RPM Fusion for Steam and for NVIDIA. I did do on my I think on the last video I did at Fedora 32, I showed you how to install RPM Fusion to get more multimedia codecs and other things like that. We're not going to take the time to do that in this particular video here. Just be aware that if you do want multimedia codecs that are not the free codecs, you are going to need to do that. You'll also need to do that for things like VLC or anything else that comes prepackaged with such codecs. But we do have the options inside of here, and there are instructions if you do the search for RPM Fusion for Fedora. Do that on an internet search, and you'll find either an RPM package to download and install or some terminal commands to run. So out of the box, though, you are going to get your Gnome software. We get the latest Firefox, all the latest applications. Everything else inside of this is basically just vanilla Gnome. We do have some nice wallpapers, but there's really nothing else to write home about. It just gives us all the latest refreshed software in Gnome, all the latest refreshed software in the repositories, and really not a whole lot else. Now, one key distinction I will point out is with Fedora, you use different package systems than you do on Ubuntu and therefore on PopOS. Whereas on PopOS, if I wanted to do something from the terminal, I would do a sudo apt, maybe sudo apt update, and then I want to do a, I can't remember if that's a comma or a semicolon. You'll see it's going to fail here. Like, command not found, what? Well, in this one, you have to do sudo DNF. Now, the difference is, though, and why some people really like DNF over apt, is I don't actually have to do apt update. If I just want to do DNF install, and I just know what package I'm installing, does this come with evolution still or not? I don't believe it comes with evolution anymore. So let's do that. So if I just do evolution, then what it's going to do, sudo DNF install evolution. Gotta install stuff. Then what it's going to do is every single time you run DNF is it runs an update first and then it installs your software. Now, I'm not the hugest fan of that because it's like if I'm installing a batch of software, I can do apt update once and then I can install my software. Whereas this is going to go through and every single software I'm running, if I'm not running it all in the same command, then it's going to go ahead and go online, every single time. Hey, we're going to check updates again. Hey, we're going to check updates again. Hey, we're going to check updates again. Not a big deal, but it does actually save you a step if you are just working for pure speed of getting single packages done. It's going to allow you to install things. The other thing that we have as far as the difference is if you want to talk about prepackaged software. So for example, I know that Skype has this as a capability. And really most software packages, if you're not talking about app images, Flatpaks and snaps, then many packages in the old way, so for example, printer drivers, they will actually have the ability to download the packages for Linux in either an RPM or a deb format. And so you can see here, it's detecting I'm on Fedora, so it suggests the RPM. So I think it's Red Hat Package Manager. And then you also have a deb, which is the Debian Package Manager. So you have both of those as options. They, of course, have the snap. They have the, Windows, Mac, whatever. But if you are using Fedora, you can just, anything that is an RPM package, you should just be able to go ahead and download this guy. It should load itself up when you are done downloading it, and then it should go ahead and open. So let's just go ahead and give that a brief try. So this is going to be a difference where you are going to use RPMs instead of debs on this, whereas on PopOS, you will go ahead and use the debs instead. Let's go ahead and close that window down there, and you can see it is installing my creepy spyware from Microsoft, but that's the first package that came to my mind that I could use as a demo for you. All right, let's go ahead and exit that terminal there, and we should now find Skype in here. Look at that. We have scary Microsoft spy tools on our desktop now. So there we have it. So Fedora's good. We have PopOS is good. Which one's going to be the best choice for you? Well, as I said, there's going to be some give and take. If you're like a pure free software nut, Fedora all the way. It's going to follow your exact philosophy. They do make it fairly simple to add the extra things that you need should you want to, but out of the box, they don't have any of that. All right. And so if you're talking about wanting the maximum computer use, you're going to want to go with PopOS. With PopOS out of the box, then you're actually going to work with the most hardware out of the box. It's going to work the best overall. And frankly, you're going to have a better overall experience. So between the two, if you're a new Linux user looking at one of these two options, I'm going to steer you towards PopOS. If you're going to be a more knowledgeable computer guy, I'm going to probably steer you more towards Fedora. It's a little bit more enjoyable experience to learn how to do everything that you're going to need to do. You'll learn a little bit more about your system. So there's kind of my take about PopOS versus Fedora. So let me know your thoughts of these. Let me know your favorite between the two of those and your experiences with these two in the comments down below. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.